So good.
Lancaster!
Welcome, goodies.
That's you.
I'm Jason Mundock, and this is So Good Lancaster. Do you go to thrift stores?
Quite often.
You're a thrifter?
I'm a big thrifter.
That's our producer, Georgia Hall.
Do you know I was a thrifter way back in the 1980s?
Were you really?
Yeah, my aunt had a shoe store next to the Goodwill in the little town I grew up in. And I liked overcoats.
Okay,
I was
yeah.
a teenager. I would wear it's like a trench coaty kind of thing.
Oh, I know what an overcoat is.
But they're like winter.
Right.
And it was very cold where I grew up.
Okay.
And so she would keep an eye out at the local Goodwill.
Because it was right next door.
It was right next door. So when they would get donations, she would walk over and she would say, "Did you get any overcoats?" And if they said yes, she would buy them for me.
You got first dibs.
I had like 4 or 5 of these really nice overcoats that were donated to the local Goodwill.
You also feel good about thrifting because it's good for the environment.
The most sustainable thing that you or anyone else around you can do is wear and use stuff that already exists. And that doesn't cost anything.
That's Amanda Lee McCarty. She's the host of the Clotheshorse podcast and a local expert on all things thrifting. Her journey from the fashion industry to advocating for slow fashion completely reshaped how she thinks about shopping. We also have Kate Farbo. She's the creative mind behind Prism Thrift, a new downtown gem that's all about helping people find clothes and accessories that reflect their true self.
It's a form of nonverbal communication as well, like of saying, this is who I am.
Today on the program, we're talking about thrifting in Lancaster.
Right here, right now.
Let's go. So Good Lancaster is powered by the Candy Factory, also known as TCF, a co-working and social club in downtown Lancaster, Pennsylvania. ClubTCF.com.
Check it out.
It's time. This is So Good.
So good.
So Good Lancaster.
She grew up living in practically every town in York County.
I can usually meet someone from York County and be like, oh, yeah, I lived there one time. So I don't claim any specific town in York, but that is where I grew up.
This is Amanda.
My name is Amanda Lee McCarty. I am the host of Clotheshorse.
She actually didn't set out for a career in fashion. Her original plan was to be an art teacher, but with limited funding for art programs, they ended up in retail instead and worked her way up to a buyer role at Urban Outfitters. The job required a lot of travel, and slowly Amanda began to realize it was not the job for her.
And I was like, take this job and shove it. I'm never working in a corporate environment again.
Amanda and her husband Dustin moved to Lancaster, not quite sure what her next steps would be. During the pandemic, they found themselves doom scrolling on Reddit, watching people discuss clothes in the fashion industry and realizing how they got it all wrong.
And I thought, would people like to hear about this stuff? Would it maybe change their relationship with stuff, with clothes, with shopping? Could this be impactful? So I started a podcast, knowing really nothing about how to do it. Just knowing that I'd listened to podcasts, it seemed like you pretty much just talked and then you put it on the internet and people might listen to it. Of course, preaching to the choir here, it's much more complicated than that. And I'm really lucky that Dustin is a professionally trained audio engineer.
And the Clotheshorse podcast was born. Amanda began reaching out to friends she'd made throughout her years in the industry, inviting them as guests to share insights and clarify the misconceptions she kept seeing. They weren't sure if anyone would tune in, but now 4.5 years and over 200 episodes later, the podcast is thriving, gathering more momentum with every listener. We also have Kate.
Hi, my name is Kate Farbo, and I'm the Executive Director of Prism Thrift.
Kate shared that when she first envisioned opening Prism, there were many issues she wanted to address, but the top priority was creating a thrift store where queer people could feel truly comfortable, somewhere they could freely explore and express themselves. She chose a downtown location, recognizing that a lot of Lancaster residents, including students and longtime locals, they don't have cars. They also aim to provide an affordable shopping option for people downtown.
So it definitely doesn't feel like walking into a Goodwill or a Salvation Army. We're downtown, so our footprint's pretty small for now. I would love to expand in a few years. So it feels more like walking into a vintage boutique. It has that kind of curated feel. We do have to curate the items that go out on the floor. We have a pretty complex system in which we do that takes into account all kinds of things, including sizing, so we can be as size inclusive as possible. And anything we decide not to sell gets redonated to the Food Hub for their free closet.
Kate pointed out that Prism is quite different from a vintage boutique or other consignment shops. As a nonprofit, Prism relies on donations for its clothing, which they carefully sort through at their own pace. This type of process allows them to price items very affordably. They also have developed their own unique system for organizing clothing, setting them apart from a typical thrift store.
The way we organize our clothing is a little different from a standard thrift store. We don't organized very strictly by gender. We have a masculine top section and a feminine top section, but that doesn't necessarily mean there aren't women's, quote unquote, women's shirts in the masculine section. And we have themed racks that we employ during certain times.
Oh, that's cool.
You know, whatever the high fever theme is this month, we'll try and get stuff pre-pulled for people. We had a Renaissance fair rack, really just trying to make people realize that they can come to us and come to thrift stores for these kinds of special occasion attire.
Kate and Prism Thrift also won the 2024 Great Social Enterprise Pitch, which is brought to you by our friends over at Assets. It started with 10 people in an 8-week course where they fine-tuned ideas and got peer feedback. 5 of them were chosen for the final pitch, with 2 extra weeks of intense prep. In her 5-minute pitch, she tackled the 3 big issues she told us about: the environmental impact of fast fashion, creating a safe space for the queer community, and making it accessible for downtown folks.
It felt great. I was shocked and shaking, and I felt really proud of myself because I worked really, really hard on that pitch.
Absolutely.
Really hard on that pitch, and it was every Wednesday night past my bedtime. I go to bed really early, past my bedtime, for 10 weeks. It felt great.
I admit I'm not as well versed in Lancaster's thrifting scene, certainly not like Kate and Amanda. So, of course, I had to ask them where Lancaster ranks on the thrifting scale.
I mean, I think it's amazing here. One, we're not in a big city, so it's not thoroughly picked over. But I just think, especially with the more locally run thrift stores here, they do such a great job of curation. And I think they're really connected with their communities. So people bring the good stuff to donate. And I feel that there's a lot more size inclusivity at most of the thrift stores here than I've seen in other places I've lived. There is just a plethora of home goods and books and appliances and anything you would ever need for your home, paper goods. It's all there. I feel really, really lucky. When we were living in Austin, we definitely missed Lancaster County thrifting. And, there are some good thrift stores in Texas. You got to drive far. We would go to San Antonio a lot. We would literally drive an hour to go thrifting because that's how insane we are for thrifting. But it was still just never as good as it is here.
I would say similarly. I think it's pretty good here. Again, yeah, I agree on the size inclusivity. I, as a plus size person, have not had a lot of trouble. And my weight has fluctuated a lot over the years, so I've been a larger plus size than I am now. Plus, there's a lot of different, I feel like, beyond just thrift stores. There's great vintage. There's great vintage malls. You've got Renninger's. You've got flea markets, vintage markets that pop up vintage markets, vintage fests. And I could say in the process of opening Prism, every single person I talked to was like, oh my God, I love thrift stores. I'm so excited. I love thrift stores. So the love for it is here too, in my opinion.
If you have workplace flexibility and can work from anywhere, you probably know how lonely it can get working all day, every day in the same building where you sleep, i.e. your house. TCF Co-working and Social Club in Lancaster is the solution. Get out of the house, work around other humans in real life, and get social with a ton of clubs, activities, and events. TCF offers community, full-time, and private office memberships and day passes if you're just passing through town. Check out clubtcf.com, book a tour, and get plugged in. During our conversation, Amanda mentioned that rather than using the term sustainable, she prefers to call it slow fashion.
I prefer the term slow fashion, which I think, for one, really that adjective slow is so powerful because we're talking about slowing down that progression of buying stuff, wear it a couple times, toss it out. We're slowing it down. We're making longer commitments to things we have. We're using them a lot longer. And we're slowing down the process of making the decision to buy something, right? The other reason I like to use the term slow fashion versus sustainable fashion is that I feel very strongly that the idea of what we think sustainable fashion is really created by brands, business, bloggers, that kind of stuff. It's not really about people. And slow fashion is about people and the community. And that means everybody, no matter how much money you have, the size of your body, the age of your body, where you live, what you do for a living, whether or not you even like to wear clothes, you can be a part of slow fashion. And you should be, because it's a people-driven movement. It's not a product or a category of product that we're being sold. It's really about us making changes within our lives and working with others to fight for what is better, right? And so I think like the myths around sustainable fashion are that it's really expensive. It doesn't have to be. Often when we talk about sustainable fashion, not only do we think it's expensive, but it's not size inclusive. It's not inclusive of different sort of aesthetics. You say sustainable fashion to people, they like, oh, you mean like some beige hemp tunic, right? That you can't be goth and be into slow fashion or be a raver and be into slow fashion. You can. It's for everyone, right? You can do cosplay. You can be Lolita. You can do whatever you want. You can be a part of slow fashion. And so I think these myths of sustainable fashion, let them go, because this in slow fashion, everyone's involved. We can all afford to be a part of it. And the last thing I'll just say is the most sustainable thing that you or anyone else around you can do is wear and use stuff that already exists. And that doesn't cost anything.
Right. Yeah. Don't rush.
Yeah.
The idea of slow fashion might seem straightforward in conversation, but it's not always that simple in practice.
Listen, sometimes I'll have conversations with people and I'll be like, it's just like wearing the same stuff over and over again, or shopping secondhand, or using things that already exist. And people are like, isn't that common sense? And I'm like, you say that, but like, let's think about the like sort of sea that we're swimming in right now, which is like, you need a new outfit for every occasion. You should never be photographed in the same outfit twice. You need a whole suitcase of clothes for vacation. I say these out loud and they sound preposterous, but we know that is what we see on social media, that we hear people talking about. Every job I've ever had, I can tell when someone's about to go on vacation because suddenly there's lots of packages for them in the mailroom. Like these are, they sound like tropes, but they're real. And so we're like breaking free from that.
Slow fashion isn't a new or unfamiliar idea, but it still has a long way to go. That being said, Amanda and Kate's outlook is pretty positive, and they seem to think that we are at least moving in the right direction.
I think we are picking up a lot of momentum. When I started Clotheshorse in 2020, only this very select small group of people was really talking about like making all of these industries more equitable and less harmful for the planet. And it felt like a little bit of an echo chamber. Sometimes we were in this little bubble, and then I would go to buy groceries and someone would buy like 1,000 styrofoam plates ahead of me in line, and I would be filled with despair. Like, what am I doing? I'm shouting to the void. It doesn't matter. But over the past few years, I see people who were not original members of that movement joining and being enthusiastic, whether it is literally my own father saying, I'm not going to buy polyester shirts anymore because Amanda said they actually shed plastic when I wear them. That's a huge win to me, right? My dad is not a fashion person. But I also see mainstream media, like big media outlets, whether it's like Good Day America or USA Today or all kinds of other publications. I mean, recently our own Lancaster newspaper published an article featuring moi about slow fashion and like reducing our consumption. And to me, that is a really big deal. Because once again,
that's a win for sure.
Yeah, these were like fringe conversations before. And I think more and more people are just seeing like, man, I buy clothes. They're not great. They don't last a long time. I feel like I'm getting ripped off. Like, we all work so hard for our money and most of us don't have very much. Like, why should we buy stuff that is planned to break?
Right.
Right. And that's what's happening with our clothes. So I think collectively these conversations are getting bigger and bigger. And I see such a diverse range of people at every thrift store I go to. It's really exciting.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing to balance out us talking about these horrific consequences to fast fashion, capitalism, whatever you want to call it, is that if you do slow down and get a little more intentional, it's actually way more fulfilling for you. At least in my experience, I can tell you, if I have to go to a Target to buy, say I need a specific pair of pants for a specific thing and I cannot find them anywhere else, and I go and I buy them at Target, it literally like doesn't even feel good, you know? And what's actually kind of beautiful about this, and maybe I'm being an idealist, but I think one of the ways out of it, at least when it comes to fashion, is really fostering personal style in a way that has longevity. Because once you find that personal style, that personal way you like to express yourself, you're holding on to those items. You're going to want to mend those items because that's a staple. That's a staple for you. Like, why would you ever get rid of that incredible coat you're wearing? You know, you're not going to buy a new one every season. You might buy a thing or two to update, to embellish, but then it's you're curating your expression, you're building your expression over time in a way that just builds on each previous year without over-consuming.
What a fascinating perspective. I love that. It's like those glasses you're wearing. Don't ever get rid of those. Those are incredible.
I love these, yeah. Thank you.
But it's right. You build your own personal brand, if you will, without it being a quote-unquote brand. Like you're building a style. You're making a statement.
Exactly. It's a form of nonverbal communication as well.
Absolutely.
Like of saying, this is who I am. At least that's how I operate anyway. So I can only speak to my experience, but that's kind of my theory.
No, I believe that. Like, actually, to go back to the coat that I'm wearing, which is awesome. It's blue suede with like a gray faux fur collar, Penny Lane kind of.
We'll have a photo in the show notes for this, for sure.
I bought this coat 9 years ago at a vintage store in Portland, Oregon. And it was like the lining was a little messed up already, which was how I was able to afford it. But I was like, I am obsessed with this coat. I'm never going to see this again. This is the coat of my dreams. It's gonna wear it with everything and take really good care of it. Like, this is a coat I want to have forever. And years, I wore it like all through the fall season. Depending on where we lived, it was more challenging because I don't want it to get wet. But a few years ago, I want to say about 5 years ago, the lining was just so bad that like I would put my coat on and my arm would get stuck in it. It was like miserable to put the coat on. You know what? I had it relined. It cost $200. They put in a whole new nice lining. They even cut out the original Sears tag and sewed it back in for me, so it almost feels like it was brand new. And yeah, so that was 5 years ago. I've had this coat for 9, almost 10 years now, and I'm planning on wearing this coat forever. And how many things in your life that you have worn can you actually say that about? Like, I put on this coat, and it's like instant dopamine rush. I'm like, yeah, I look great today. Right? I feel like the best version of myself. And it's not brand new. I think that we're trained that like brand new is what makes you feel good and makes people think you're cool and like look good and you're successful or whatever it is, whatever the image is that you're trying to get out there to people. But it's not brand new. It's what you love that makes people be like, wow, you look amazing.
That's great.
And so I think like we're just not used to doing that anymore, and I think that as a result a lot of people are walking around not feeling great about what they're wearing,
just jumping from like micro trend to micro trend.
Yeah.
Are you looking for the perfect space for your next meeting, media project, or private event? Well, TCF has you covered. Our conference rooms are perfect for meetings with your team or your clients. Our media studio can accommodate photography, audio, and video production. And our 6th-floor venue has everything you need to throw an unforgettable private party or retreat. Book now at lancastervenue.com and take your next event to the next level. Getting started with slow fashion might be easier than you think. Amanda and Kate offered their practical advice to help you take those first steps toward a more mindful wardrobe.
I could tell you how it began for me. I mean, I've been thrifting my whole life, right? But only in the last 5 years have I been pretty much exclusively secondhand or like small independent slow fashion designer is kind of like the extent of how I shop for clothing now. And I started with giving myself basically a New Year's resolution. I said, like, this year I am not buying any fast fashion unless I absolutely am required to. Like, if there is something I have to go to with a specific dress code and I just can't find it otherwise, I'll allow myself. I had like very small specific exceptions for this. And I it was much easier than I thought. And maybe that's because I have the history of thrifting my whole life. But that is also when my mind shifted. And like now, if I didn't find it in a hunt, it doesn't even give me the dopamine, you know?
Right. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I mean, I can imagine situations like, if you're a nurse, for example, and you have to wear particular kind of shoes and they have to be comfortable and that sort of thing. But boy, if you're limiting it to that, that's a huge step.
And I mean, don't sleep on, it's not as great as like going into the store and buying it there because, you have shipping costs and stuff associated. But don't sleep on the secondhand apps because you can find, that's how I get my shoes. Like I have a size 11 foot. Right? Like the chances of me going into a thrift store and finding a shoe in my size that's like my style is just like not going to happen. But I know the brands I like, I know the types of shoes I like, and I know what to search for. And I just wait until, that's the other thing. Wait.
Slow down.
Unless you can't wait, like for very specific reasons, just wait. I waited until the docs I wanted came up on Depop. I waited until these Converse came up on Depop, and I got them for way less than you would have gotten them new. And they're already broken in and comfy.
It's kind of like when you give yourself these challenges, you're sort of gamifying it. And I think most of us, we're pretty competitive with ourselves and like want to hold ourselves to that. So I did a similar thing for myself, actually, well before Clotheshorse. It was in 2018. We were thrift shopping in Limerick, Pennsylvania, a great thrift store there. And I was walking through the kitchen section. And I was like, why would anyone ever buy like a brand new anything for their kitchen or their home when like every thrift store I've ever gone to has like 20 aisles of dishes and cups and whatnot. And so I said, in our household, we don't buy anything new for the house anymore unless we have exhausted all options for secondhand. And it was so easy. It seemed like it was going to be hard at first, but it was like, oh, well, we could look on Facebook Marketplace. We could look in our Buy Nothing group. Yeah, me too. Love Facebook Marketplace. And it's exceptional here in Lancaster.
It's really good.
Shout out. About to, after this, go pick up a dishwasher, actually, from Facebook Marketplace. But, that in the beginning, it was like, okay, it's not as hard as like solving the world's problems with the fashion industry, but I'm just saying like maybe we don't need to go to Home Goods anymore, And it was fun, and it actually made our house cuter, and we had cuter dishes, and it was just people came over and were like, everything's so curated here, but like in an honest way. And starting there was just like a baby step for me, like, okay, well, now we don't buy anything brand new unless it's like urgent or like something we can't find. And then you don't think about it anymore. Like I just don't think about it. I had an emergency situation where we were going to go on vacation and my sneaker cracked in half. And I was like, this is my only pair of sneakers. What am I going to do? And I went on Posh Park and got another pair of secondhand sneakers that came before we left on our trip. And I didn't even think about it. I wasn't like, oh, no, we got to go to the mall. I just immediately got out my phone and searched for those sneakers. And that's the thing is like these changes seem huge, but they aren't once you're living them.
Slow fashion isn't exactly a new concept, but it's still a bit of a challenge for most people. Even though more folks are starting to appreciate buying less and going for quality over quantity, it goes against the usual fast fashion habits. Shifting to slow fashion takes a change in mindset and can be hard to stick with. However, with places like Prism Thrift creating accessible options and podcasts like Clotheshorse spreading awareness, it feels like slow fashion might just be catching on and could even start gaining real popularity. A huge thank you to Amanda and Kate for joining us at the So Good Media studio. You can find Prism Thrift at 101 North Queen Street, Suite 99 right in downtown Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Follow them on Instagram at Prism Thrift. Be sure to also check out Amanda's Clotheshorse podcast on Instagram at Clotheshorse Podcast, and listen wherever you get your podcasts. Hey goodies, we love hearing from you. Let's reach into the goodie bag and hear what you have to say. Big shout out to Austin V. Kirby. Big birthday coming up in just a couple of weeks in December. Austin's turning the big 3-0.
Woo!
Happy birthday, Austin.
Happy birthday, Austin. We also got a comment on our Reddit thread, which we posted in regards to episode 4, which was our Sweet Treats episode, where Metropolis PT1 commented and said if we're thinking of Lancaster as a county, it would be a crime not to include Achenbach's pastries.
Whoa, okay.
Which Guess we have some reaching out to do for part 2.
Fair play. We're checking out Achenbach's pastries on an upcoming episode. How about that?
Home of the Long Johns. Want to throw your thoughts into the goodie bag? Let us know what you think of today's episode, or if you have any fun announcements or events you'd like us to share on the show. We're all ears.
Head over to sogoodlancaster.com and submit your comments. Your thoughts and announcements could be featured on an upcoming episode of So Good Lancaster. That's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. We'll catch you next time. In the meantime, stay good, Lancaster. Stay good. So Good Lancaster is produced at So Good Media in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Our production staff is Ann Kirby, Georgia Hall, and Star Snyder, and I do a few things here and there as well. Find us online at sogoodlancaster.com and follow us on all the socials. Have any comments, questions, or want to learn more about how So Good Media can help you with your podcast and media productions? Drop us a line at hello@sogoodmedia.studio.